You are now listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
IELTS Speaking Confidence. This is your 23-minute crash course. This tutorial is based off the curriculum of the Speaking Confidence course we have at IELTSpodcast.com. It's a very high-level overview, but it's still packed with a ton of practical advice to boost your confidence and improve your fluency. If you found some of this advice useful, or you couldn't get to grips with it, maybe it was a bit too confusing, then you can go over to IELTSpodcast.com and you can have a look at the course, and maybe you want to invest in the course to boost your speaking abilities and find out what I was talking about. It'll go into more detail with more exercises, and of course, if you don't like it, you can get a quick refund, no problem. Right then, let's jump into it. So competency, fluency, the common issues, and we're going to look at the reasons and the mindset as well. So first of all, you probably want to identify where you're losing points. Is it pronunciation? Is it your vocabulary? Do you just get nervous as soon as you start speaking? I know so many students who can speak to me quite freely, and then even when we go into the IELTS mode, they just freeze up. When I mean IELTS mode, I'm asking them like IELTS Part 3 questions, or they're doing a cue card. And this is so common. This is so common. And what I found with students in Asia, especially Chinese students, is that they focus on the accuracy because they don't want to make mistakes. But they focus on the accuracy so much that it hinders, it inhibits the fluency. Whereas students from Latin America or the Mediterranean, like Southern European, Italians, Spaniards, whatnot, these students often, this is a huge generalization, but these students often struggle with the accuracy. They'll just speak and speak and they've got no problems, but a lot of the times there's some grammar errors in there. So, and just one last thing with Slavic speakers, it's usually the pronunciation that trips them up, and the use of articles as well. So what I'm saying is you need to probably find which area you're struggling with. Is it accuracy? Is it fluency? And a good way to do this is to get feedback. And there's lots of tools out there, and I'll mention a few later on. So let's have a look at confidence. Now, with confidence, it's kind of like a funny one. As I was saying before, a lot of students, they fall to bits when they're inside the exam room. Now, if this is you, then I'm going to share a very useful technique with you, which is called reflecting. So this is basically using the words in the question in your answer. So if the examiner says, are festivals an important part of your culture? You say, yes, festivals are an important part of our culture because. And what you're doing is just reflecting what you hear. And this is easy to understand. You'd be like, I can do that tomorrow. But just yesterday I was working with a student from India, and the amount of times she reflected, but there were prepositions missing, or she stumbled and used a different tense. And the problem with this is that, one, the accuracy of your answer diminishes if you're dropping prepositions and whatnot. Second, if you're not using the exact tense, or if you're not reflecting exactly, which would include using the exact tense, then you run the risk of answering the question you thought was answered was asked rather than answering the question that was actually asked. And this compounds because now it's the first sentence of your reply, and then you carry on developing it, so you're going further down the wrong track. And with every word that is further mentioned, you are diminishing the chances of scoring points because you're answering the wrong question. So this is why it's incredibly important. The other advantage of using this technique is that it gives you a few seconds. It gives you a few seconds just to formulate your answer, so you know exactly what you're going to say for the first few words, and those first few words start you off on the right track, and then you can just build up from there. Now, when I'm working with a private student, I drill this, and we do lots of different exercises, and the goal is to get it quick and automatic, and it's almost robotic. And that's fine, because at that point of answering like a robot, we've reached a level called automaticity. We've reached a level of automaticity where it's quick and it's natural, and then from there we can start improving it. And by saying, for example, are festivals important in your country? Oh yes, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, festivals are incredibly important in our country. This is because, and it makes you sound more natural, but it still retains all the benefits of reflecting the question. So we've still bought ourselves a few seconds to think of the answer, the content of the answer, but we've just made it a little bit more natural, and we've added some emphasis, maybe some intonation. Oh yes, definitely. You see, and we're going up and down, and this makes it sound so much more natural. But to get to that level, first you need, in my experience, we need to drill and just master this response. In fact, one useful exercise we do is I will give a student a list of part 3 questions, and they have to write out the reflected answer. And this just helps a student get into the habit of sort of like recognizing the tense and then giving the correct answer. Now then, going back to the course, a good technique, a useful technique, is just to know about your own country. There is a chance that you're going to get asked about your country. So I said this years ago. If the teacher asked me where I'm from, I could say, oh, I'm from Manchester. I'm from a town called Huddersfield near Manchester in England. That's okay. But what if I said, I'm from a town, it's called Huddersfield. It's in the county Yorkshire. It's about 40 minutes away from Manchester. And as you might know, these towns and these cities, especially in the north, were quite famous for around the Industrial Revolution. So yeah, that's where I'm from, and I recently moved back. Okay, just a little bit more detail. And I know this because I know a little bit of history about the region where I'm from. Maybe you're going to say, oh, I'm from Marrakesh. It's a city in Morocco, and it's quite popular with tourists from Northern Europe. I think it's because of the food and the weather that we offer there in Marrakesh. Okay, that's it, straightforward. But you need to know what's going on in your city. What's it famous for? Just check the Wikipedia article about your city. And if you can't find anything about your city, then it's time to move. I'm just joking. I'm sure you could find something. You could even just say like, oh, it's a little known village on the outskirts of Delhi, and it's not very famous, but we do have some amazing chapatis there. We do have some amazing local cuisine. Okay? Now then, for part 2. We have the cue card. Now, again, just like General Task 1, we're going to follow the bullet points in the cue card, in the question. But it's useful to have a few structures you can rely on. Now, a few of these structures, it could be, this is the basic structure we teach, we've got a few different frameworks to use, but I'll just give you the basic ones. A phrase to use to get started. I would like to tell you about a local festival in my country. Just having little phrases like this can help you reduce your nerves, because now you've got a plan. Now you know how to start it, and it just sounds so much more eloquent. And likewise, when we've finished talking, and that is my small talk about festivals, or that's my little talk about festivals we have in our country. I hope you liked it. Smile. Okay. And that just avoids the awkward pause, and because the examiner's not going to say anything. And what a lot of students do is get nervous and then keep talking and talking and talking and making more grammar mistakes because they're nervous. However, just saying that little phrase just stops that issue from happening, and we can move on now to part 3. Thank you very much, Mr. Examiner. And smile as well. This examiner, they're facing a lot of, how many? About 12, 16, 20 students a day when they're examining, especially on the weekends. This is a lot. Make their job easier. It's not going to hurt you. Smile. Be a human. And that's another side note, actually. Go into the speaking exam. 1, warmed up, having spoken to somebody in English, maybe in the last 60 minutes. You don't want to go in there having not used your English for over 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because, and I know this because I speak other languages, and it even happens to me in English, can you believe? If I haven't spoken to anybody for a day or two, when I do, I get this like social anxiety, and it disappears maybe after 5-10 minutes, but that's compounded if I'm speaking in Spanish. I'm rusty to get going, but then after maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes, my brain's warmed up. It's like a muscle. I'm warmed up and I'm speaking, the vocabulary's coming, and you don't want to be warming up for your IELTS exam. You want to be going in there steaming hot, all right? You want to be going in there loose and warmed up and relaxed and ready to get your exam and ready to move forward in life. Anyway, I went off on a tangent. So we're talking about frameworks. We've got that phrase. I would like to talk about education in my country. I would like to talk about festivals in my town, so on and so forth. I'd like to tell you about a teacher, my favorite teacher I had at college. Okay? And then we're ending it, as I said. And now, if you're a student who struggles to fill those 2 minutes, you need a framework. And a framework could be just using the bullet points and then add, saying, I like this teacher because they were warm, generous, and extremely kind-natured. For example, now give me a real-world example. For example, I remember a few years ago, I was feeling really sick. I think I had the flu or possibly even COVID. And the the tutor I had at that time, they were really considerate, and they offered to extend my deadline by 2 weeks. I didn't even have to ask. So this is just another reason why I like this tutor. Okay, just give a little example in there. And if you're going higher level, we can even make comparisons. We use different tenses. We could say something like, whereas nowadays my tutors at university, they're very strict and they're not as warm, they're not as kind-natured as my previous tutor. A little comparison there, a little change of tenses, show the examiner we've got control of this exam. Another technique we can use to prepare is we can write out our answers to recent cue cards. Just write it down so we're not caught, as the expression goes, we're not caught with our pants down. We're not caught in an embarrassing situation of having to think of our favorite tutor. We already covered it last week when we were writing out just sample answers. Okay? Now, another technique we can do, this is related to confidence and to nerves, is to control our breathing. Now, I would be a fraud if I said this will cure your nerves. All I'm saying is try it out. Try some rhythmic breathing. Try some meditation. Try some concentration or music or some relaxation music. You need to try all these different techniques, do some research, find out what works for you personally. I know some people, they cannot meditate for the life in them. They just cannot sit still. My dad would come to mind here, okay? And other people, meditation will work. I mean, personally, meditation for me works an absolute dream, and my brain is so much clearer afterwards, and I'm speaking clearer, I'm thinking clearer, I'm writing clearer. It's like a spring clean for my mind. But I know it's not for everybody, so you need to work out what works for you. Again, focus music. I go onto YouTube, or I use brainfm.com, and I listen to focus music when I need to write some work, do some writing. This works an absolute treat for me. I'm only sharing what works for me. Okay, you need to find out what works for you. Test my suggestions. If they don't work, move on, find some other ones. Okay. Again, let's have a look at your vocabulary. Are you repeating words? Are you using the same vocabulary again and again? For part 3, you need to, you'll know if you're getting a band 7 or a band 8 if you start hearing the same question again and again, but asked in different terms, different vocabulary. This is a good sign. Don't get fed up. Don't use phrases like, as I just said, okay? You just answer again, but use different vocabulary. Show the examiner you've got the skills to answer the same question in a different manner. You can even look at it from different perspectives. Okay, say, for example, you've answered, is pollution a topic of concern in your country? You answered the question. Now you get the question again. What do? Well, you could say, I think actually, especially in my region, pollution is definitely a topic of concern. And I think it's more of a concern for the younger generation, because it's going to be them who are most impacted when they're older by the actions of what's happening today. So it is a very crucial, significant topic nowadays, especially for the younger ones. There we go. And we just look at it from a different perspective. Then we get the question again, because the examiner's a real pain in the bum. And we can say, well, I guess it is an important topic, especially globally, but I don't think it's really seen as that important regarding the older generation, perhaps because they know that they're not going to be suffering the consequences, or perhaps there's even an element of guilt because the younger generations are inheriting the problems partially caused by the older generation. So I guess for them it's not so important. Okay, so we did like 3 different answers there, just looking at different perspectives on the same question. Now, listening skills, and I'm just going to, it's a little bit of repetition, because as I said before, when we're reflecting the answer, we're really showing the examiner we've got the listening skills, and this is so important. It's so important. We're answering the right question, and we're also paying attention to the prepositions, the articles, and this is incredibly important. But it's not a skill that you can get insanely. You can't get it quickly. I mean, we can develop it over a few classes if you're working privately with me, because I'm just drilling and it's just intense and it's tough, okay? And we kind of like fast track it. However, if you haven't got a tutor who's going to be just drilling you with very specific, very niche activities, which is what we do, then a good way to develop this skill is just start to listen to tutorials, listen to podcasts, listen to tutorials, and also just listening, pause and then repeat exactly what you heard, exactly like the listen, cover, write techniques that I've mentioned in previous tutorials. Also, just one last point here, you want to get used to different accents. If you're only listening to American series or sitcoms, as they're called in the US, then you're going to be very adept with the American accent. But the moment you start listening to a northerner from the UK, not myself, I'm a northerner from the UK, but my accent has been reduced significantly. But somebody who hasn't had their accent reduced, an Irish person, for example, or a Scottish person, or even Australian or a South African, getting broadly aware and developing the skill of tuning into accents. And it might take you a minute, it might take you 5 minutes, but you want to reduce it so you can start understanding almost immediately whichever accent. And you get this by listening to a broad range of different material, or a broad range of different authentic material. If you want a very quick crash course, you can listen to those 30 accents in 20 minutes or 30 accents in 5 minutes. Those famous videos on YouTube, and they're mimicking a Nigerian, and then they're mimicking a Scottish person, then a Welsh person, then a Scouse, then a Manc, then a Geordie, and so on and so forth. And they're quite entertaining. Obviously, it's not the most academic way to prepare, but it will give you sort of like a quick crash course. And then if any of those accents you're not understanding, then it's like, okay, I've got no idea what this Irish person's saying. Then obviously you can look at it from an academic point of view. How do Irish people speak? Or you could just listen to Irish material and a podcast by Irish people, just to get your ability up there. And if you're feeling really brave, you can start listening to them at a faster pace. And this will help you obviously start decoding, deciphering, tuning in quicker, assuming you're able to do it. Right then, we're coming up to the 22-minute mark. This is the end of the tutorial. If you need help on any of those points that I've mentioned, then you can go to IELTS Podcast, have a look at our online courses, have a look at the Speaking Confidence, maybe buy it. As I said before, if you're not keen, you can get a full refund. You can dive into the tutorial. You can there's exercises there, speaking and listening, and very soon, actually, I almost forgot about this, probably by the time this tutorial is published, if we're lucky, we might have our AI speaking feedback tool available. And as I said in previous tutorials, smart students nowadays are using tools rather than just information. So have a look at that at IELTSpodcast.com. When you go over there, you can sign up. And if we haven't released it yet, just by signing up, you will be notified as soon as we release it. And it looks pretty cool, to be honest. That's it. Have a beautiful day. Good luck with your IELTS exam and all the best.
Thanks for listening to IELTSpodcast.com.